Emotionally damaged hosts at the MSNBC are pondering, oh no, Trump got a win. And I mean, they flat out say it on NBC. This is a huge win for Trump regarding the delays at the Supreme Court with Jack Smith's and Merrick Garland's crooked efforts. Welcome to Doug in Exile. This is where the happy patriots are. At least one reason why I'm smiling is because this is another huge win for Trump. It clears things up a lot at the Supreme Court for him. Not completely out of the woods, but you'll see where they go. Even if Trump is found guilty, he's winning. Here's criminal mastermind Eric Holder, the bag man, the man he was the Merrick Garland for Barack Obama, also held in contempt of court, did not go to jail like all of the Republicans do, like Steve Bannon, like Peter Navarro did. Garland avoided it. Eric Holder avoided it. Let's watch.
Anything less than a decision by the Supreme Court that says a president should be held to the laws just like any other American citizen should be. Anything other than that is absurd.
As we continue to await the Supreme Court's decision on Donald Trump's presidential immunity claim, the court heard oral arguments on April 25th, and a decision is expected before the end of the month.
So this is about Trump's immunity. Remember, if Trump as a president is found to be immune, then he is done. Like, they can't touch him. Now, they're not going to offer blanket absolute immunity, which would cover him being able to say, shoot an opponent, right, before an election. They're not going to say that's okay. They're going to say limited immunity. Among the limited immunity things does he have? Does he have the limited immunity to be able to question an election, which they claimed, the J6ers claim, was an insurrection and, of course, was not.
And these delays are conscious, are they not?
They're certainly conscious, Mika, on behalf of at least some of the justices, particularly given their decision to schedule briefing in the way that they did.
This is finding conspiracies over at the Supreme Court saying, why did they delay? I'm going to bring up this article from Salon to show you that is a conspiracy, that it is not true that the Supreme Court has an intent to delay. This is business as usual for the Supreme Court. Quote, intentional Harvard legal scholar says SCOTUS deliberately delayed Trump immunity ruling. That is, I believe, false. The Supreme Court delay in deciding Trump's immunity case makes a trial before election highly unlikely, legal experts say. Special counsel Jack Smith, who brought the 4-count indictment against Trump in 2023, has accused the former president of conspiring to thwart the 2020 electoral defeat and the peaceful transfer of power to President Joe Biden. Now, this is the first clue that you have that it is not the Supreme Court dragging their feet. It's that Jack Smith brought in a 4-count indictment. He could have gone with 1 count. Lawrence Tribe, a constitutional law professor emeritus at Harvard University, meaning he's always wrong and a sellout and a flaming liberal, said the Supreme Court has dragged its feet. No proof of that. This is cheap fake news. It's obvious that the court has deliberetely delayed everything, unquote, he said. Quote, it could easily have issued a ruling much sooner. That is the sole reason he gives. They could have done it sooner. Well, yeah, Martians could have landed, could have. This is not evidence. This is just liberal guys trying to throw shade at the Supreme Court, trying to pressure them into taking this thing up, and it doesn't work. Last December, U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkin, remember her, rejected Trump's motion to dismiss the charges on grounds of absolute presidential immunity, which he argues completely shields him from prosecution for any actions taken while in office. Now, they're trying to exaggerate that to make it sound like he was asking to do something weird. No, he's only saying that he's immune. He's allowed to have free speech. He's allowed to question an election. He's allowed to tell people to peacefully march onto the Capitol. They went back to a Civil War law that said he was trying to perform an insurrection. And that's part of what was the states were saying to try and take his name off the ballot. Trump has argued the House has to impeach a former president and the Senate has to convict before a president could be criminally prosecuted. That is, if he did something wrong with his presidency, they can impeach him and then they can prosecute him because then he's no longer president and no longer has presidential immunity. In February, the DC Circuit upheld the Judge Chutkin's decision and rejected Trump's claim. Chutkan also indefinitely delayed Trump's original March 2024 trial date until courts resolved Trump's immunity argument. That's because she didn't want to have to backpedal and say, I've been reversed by the Supreme Court. He had immunity. This is part two of the proves that the Supreme Court wasn't the one behind the delay. Tanya Chutkan is the one who permanently delayed her court case waiting for immunity. Trump then asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on other justices' thoughtful consideration. In late January, the Supreme Court decided to take up Trump's immunity appeal. It could have taken the case in December when the special counsel asked it to be heard directly, or they could have declined to take the case after the Court of Appeals quite comprehensively rejected Trump's appeal. So the trial could be over by now, Tribe said. Instead, the court has dragged its feet. Here's in Trump's defense, okay? This is Claire Wolford, political science professor at the College of Charleston, said it's, quote, certainly fair to criticize the court for not taking up the case sooner, but she added, quote, if you wanted, there are lots of people you could hold responsible for how long this is taking. Here's the biggest, for instance, Democrat Attorney General Merrick Garland, for example. He's faced criticism already for waiting until November 2022 to appoint Jack Smith in the first place, because none of the facts changed in Trump's trajectory other than he decided to run for president. The Washington Post reported that the FBI resisted investigating January 6th for over a year. So whose fault is that? But once the Supreme Court decided to take up the appeal, Wolford said she hasn't been surprised by how long it's taken for the Supreme Court to release a decision on a sweeping constitutional question. Quote, if you want something to be reasonable and rational and thoughtful and ordered, it doesn't happen quickly. And that's where the Democrats do not care. They just want it to be rushed. And that's the difference in what animates the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is to be thorough, because if you're going to decide for all of America, what kind of immunity does a president have? Will it include a hypothetical insurrection? Will it include free speech of being able to question elections? That takes time. And that's not why the Democrats wanted this. They did not want to know what the Supreme Court thought. They just wanted to get Trump before the election. That's all they want. They're the one whose character we can impugn and make fun of for wanting to rush this thing, because they only want to affect an election. Let's go back to this video real quick from MSNBC as they drown in their soy milk tears.
The delay itself is the win.
Take the win. Woo!
Even if we see a decision, let's say tomorrow or Friday, that is a full victory for Jack Smith and his team, the damage will have largely been done.
If you're scowling right now, you better turn it upside down. Even if Trump gets convicted, he's winning.
It's not clear whether the case can be tried in the time remaining before the election, or whether Judge Tanya Chutkan has the will to impose a trial on that schedule. You'll hear people complain bitterly, for example, that the Department of Justice policy forbids taking certain steps, certain number of days before election, whether 60 to 90 days.
By the way, that's not a hard deadline where they say you can't take it within 60 to 90 days. It's just a suggestion. So technically they could. I think Democrats will break that rule, including running this thing to the Supreme Court 3 days before the election. They do not care about the rules.
Remember, they could have intervened in December. Jack Smith saw this possibility and went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, why don't you come in now before the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rules, and let's get this out of the way. And the Supreme Court said, no, that's too early.
Not just no, it's too early, but why are you rushing this thing past the Court of Appeals? It's like they're not here to do Jack Smith's bidding. And just because Jack Smith has inflated this thing and said, oh, this is totally important, this is the end of democracy if you don't look at this thing, does not mean the Supreme Court has to agree. They may think he is a Democrat operative or politicizing not only the election, not only convicting Trump, but now they're politicizing the Supreme Court. The Democrats want to turn it to a political operative thing, and the Supreme Court could just be acting with great neutrality. We cannot impugn their character. We don't know, and MSNBC definitely doesn't know. The only thing they do know is this is a Trump win. I'm Doug in Exile. Let us know in the comments below. Are you smiling yet that Trump is going to win?